Hello and welcome to take 2 of episode 5 of the Eternal Insiders podcast. With me as always is my partner Cam O'Neill, and down here is the main man Eric Uresk. Did I say that right? I've always wondered how that
That's probably the way you're supposed to say it, but the Americanized version is Uresk. But
Uresk.
Yeah, I would imagine in Europe they pronounced it the way you did.
What was the background on that? Is that a European?
Dude, it's European. I'm a mutt. So it's from my father's side, and he's Polish, German, Austrian, and maybe a couple of other things. I think it's Polish, Austrian. It might even be Slavic. We're not quite sure is exactly where the last name from. It's not a very common last name.
No, I've never heard it before.
Yeah.
So just for full disclosure to everyone listening, and if you think that, I think you two are wearing kind of similar clothes, I'm wearing a bit different, but this is take 2 because there was a technical error yesterday. We missed the first 20 minutes of the podcast, which was probably the most insightful part. So we're just gonna re-record that. So Eric, if you could just what my opinion is that Eric is the forerunner at the moment in taking the mental side of the game and really trying to focus in on that, as well as obviously a polished skill set in just about every aspect of MMA as well. Eric's really sort of bought into the cerebral and the mental side of fighters and that part of the development and growth, which is great in itself. But given Eric's story and Eric's backstory and where he came from, it's even more impressive to me because it's all self-taught. There's no sort of background education there. It's all like picking up books, I'm guessing. Anyway, Eric, if you want to give us the scope on what I just covered.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I don't really have much formal education at all. But I've always been just a lifelong student of the few things that I'm interested in. And so as you mentioned, I do really like to attack and I suppose I don't look at it as like the cerebral part of the game, because I look at it as I look at fighting as a whole. So I don't see people having a personal life and then a professional life and then and dividing things apart. So when I look at a fighter, I look at everything in your life is going to affect how present you can be in the gym and how present you can be in the fight, and that's going to ultimately affect your performance. So if your relationships are fucked up, we're going to figure that out, and it's going to show in the gym, it's going to show in the cage. If you have emotional issues where you're eating, if you have maybe substance abuse problems, any of those things that are interfering, I don't see those as things that can be ignored, because they're ultimately all going to affect the finished product. And so how did I get into that, and why do I make it my business to do that? So just to kind of run back through, I grew up in Long Island, New York in the 90s. It was obviously it was a different world back then, and I grew up in an abusive household with a lot of alcoholism, a lot of addiction in my family, and home was not a safe place for me. So I hung out on the street. I hung out around the corner with a lot of older guys, and they were nicer. They was nice to me. They were nicer to me than my father and my family was, and it felt safe to be around there. And they were criminals, and so they were good guys, but they were involved in street stuff, and they I just kind of tagged along and fell into that. And that's what these guys taught me. They taught me how to rob and steal and sell drugs and make money and do that type of thing. So I became a problem child fairly early. I started seeing professionals about my substance abuse at like 14 years old. I started seeing state professionals, and my life was going on a downward track pretty quickly. And I had wrestled a little bit in high school, and that was kind of the only thing that at like 15, 16. And that was the only thing that sort of had any hope in my life. Other than that, my goal at 15, 16 was to be Scarface, like that's what I wanted to do as a kid. And wrestling gave me some other hopes. And I always kind of had it in the back of my mind. I think I'd mentioned this yesterday, but I loved fighting. By the time, as a kid, even a small kid, I would get into fist fights around the neighborhood. By the time I was about 12 years old, I had probably had at least 50 street fights, and I would keep track. I was very
What was your record?
Honestly, I only lost one street fight growing up, like a one-on-one street fight, and that was I might have been 18, and I got blackout drunk with a bunch of my friends, and my cousin lived in a nice area. He wasn't rich, but he went to school at a rich school, and so I told him I was going to come to this party, and he said, "Don't bring any thugs with you," right? So So exactly what I did is I brought a carload of thugs with me, and we drove up to this nice, rich, high school party. And I was blacked out by the time I got there. I had I wanted a cigarette. Somebody didn't have the kind of cigarette I liked, so I slapped them. And then and I knew a bunch of people that I was friends with them. And a kid I was friends with, he was a big guy, like over 300 pounds at the time. He tried to calm me down, and I cracked a bottle and went to bottle him, and we decided to just shoot the head up instead. And I was so drunk, I shot a double leg, but the guy was 300 pounds. So I just fell over when I hit him on the double leg. And he just sat on my chest and hit me a couple times. And I was giggling. And my boys jumped in and tuned him up. And I proceeded to try to chase after him. And I ran into a few trees and a few fences. I think I fucked myself up worse than he did. And that was my only L in an actual street fight that I can think of, other than getting jumped, where it's 12-on-1 and there's not much chance that you have at that point. But so I was getting into fights all the time, and I knew I wanted to fight in the UFC the moment I saw 1992 or 3, when I saw the first UFC with Royce Gracie. I was like, fuck, I'm definitely gonna do that. I was obsessed with Bloodsport. I was obsessed with the Karate Kid, like Rocky movies, all that stuff. I loved fighting. I loved violence. It made me feel powerful and in control. And in my normal, at home, I didn't have any of those feelings. But I figured out fairly young that I could fight fairly well, and I kind of weaponized it quickly. So by the time I'm 17, right, I start wrestling in high school. They're like, wow, this kid's got a lot of talent. I do really well in the freestyle and Greco element of the sport after the high school season. And they're really hopeful about what my future looks like. And a lot of life started to compound itself. And I never learned how to compete or how to be a serious athlete at this time. And by the time I was 17, I was homeless, living in the back of a truck in the woods, and basically surviving from the stick-ups and burglaries and the petty crimes that I could do. I mean, I basically made most of my money setting up drug deals and robbing the people when they got there. That's how I just saw it as 100% profit. I was too lazy to sell. I sold drugs here and there, but I just saw I could just take what they got, or their cash or their drugs, and it's all profit. That cuts me having to do the hard work of waiting for customers and whatnot. But obviously that's a dicey business, and things would get ugly from time to time. And I got locked up a couple times for doing it. And I was in and out of psych wards. I was in and out of hospitals, overdoses, and long-term rehab facilities. And this would just be a never-ending cycle of madness that was going on in my life. And so the only hope and knowing that I was capable of more used to kill me. So I stopped having fun. Like, the drugs and alcohol weren't fun. The street shit wasn't fun to me anymore. I just didn't know what else to do. I didn't have another plan, anything in life that other than I loved wrestling, I loved training, and I knew that I wanted to do that at some point. And it was a few years of getting my act together, and I would train and I would be in the gym, and I started training with these Russian guys in Brooklyn, and they kind of really brought my wrestling skills to a pretty high level. They were all the coach was a Soviet Union wrestling coach in the 70s, and he moved here in the early 80s, and so we had all these studs from all these republics in Russia that would come there and train. But then I would do good for a few months, and then I'd kind of fall off, and then they wouldn't see me for weeks, months at a time, and this went on for a while. And then at 23, I stopped drinking and doing drugs for good. I haven't had a drink since, and I've been sober since, and that was almost 16 years ago. So I get sober, and I know that fighting and training is what I want to do. I don't have any other plans. I was not a backup plan type of guy. If I was going to do this, this is what I was going to do. And so I continued wrestling for a little while, and I got pretty good, but I wasn't going to make the Olympic team, and there was no money in wrestling, and so I knew I wanted to fight. And so around 25, I got involved in some underground MMA fights in New York City. These were like real no holds barred fights, no gloves, no necessary equipment, no doctors, no nothing. There wasn't really even any money involved, but just guys that wanted to fight would show up and fight in these abandoned lofts, or gyms would host them sometimes. And so I got involved in a few of those, and then was training other disciplines, trying to learn how to box and do this and that. But the whole time I'm starting this, and it's important to note that a person that becomes an addict or an alcoholic, right? They become that way for a reason, in my experience, right? So there's some trauma, there's some undealt with stuff where, and I work with a lot of, I work helping a lot of people try to get sober, and so one of the underlying characteristics is a lack of connection that these people feel to the rest of the world. And so, you get drunk, you start to feel that sense of connection. It takes away all that, whatever it is. And I didn't replace that with anything. So I still felt this lack of connection. Deep down, I still felt like a piece of shit, and that I wasn't worth nothing. But I figured if I could achieve enough, like nobody would find that out, but I still knew the truth. In my head, I'm still walking around with this. And so I go and, I start a fight career, and Full Contact Fighter gave me a little write-up way back, and they were expecting big things out of me, and like calling me like the next Sean Shirk. And, I didn't live up to any of that hype through my fight career. I trained on some gyms on Long Island. I lived in Vegas, and I trained at Extreme Couture for a few years, and then ultimately settled down at Alliance MMA for most of my career. And for the amount of talent that I had, didn't accomplish anywhere near what I could or should have, probably, and largely due to just being an emotional wreck, like having a loser's mindset. And this is something I discovered later on, is that I had the mindset of a loser, that the world owes me, that I need somebody to take care of me. Somebody should save me from the circumstances that I'm living, and things aren't fair. And, I had a 2.5 year layoff where fights got canceled back to back to back. 2.5 years twice. So that's 5 years. And I fully believe that I caused that to happen with my loser mentality. I think I really, as crazy as it sounds, I think I attracted that to myself. I really believe that I attracted that to myself. I don't believe it was bad luck. I don't believe, things happen. And I don't think it was chance at all. I 100% believe that I attracted that to myself. That I lost 5 years of my competitive career because I had this scarcity mindset, this poverty mindset, and this loser's mindset. and I had no idea. And so I moved to Phuket, uh, looking for some, new avenues to get fights. And after being there for about a year and a half, maybe 2 years, I'm training for fights that aren't happening. So again, I go through a long period of another drought of fights, and I train for a fight. And the week of, a couple days before the fight, I find out the fight's not going to happen. My opponent's visa or something doesn't go through, and I'm devastated. And I realize, and I had been doing some work at this time, and I decided to retire from mixed martial arts at 35 years old. And so to go back just a little bit, before I retired, I was in this place where I'm living in Phuket, and the past whatever 8 to 10 years that I was doing this, I'm living this rock star lifestyle, right? I'm, between living in the Hamptons in the summertime in New York and working in nightclubs there, living in Vegas, living in San Diego, hanging out and with the highest circles of MMA people and everything that goes along with that, and fight groupies, and really just having this crazy life. And now I'm living in Phuket. Same thing. I work in paradise. I live in paradise. I've got, everything you think like a young man would want, right? A full bank account, women coming and going from all different countries, from, tourists, and doing what I love, but I'm miserable, right? Absolutely miserable. And so you got to, like, that doesn't even make sense, right? How does that make sense? And so, my internal condition had nothing to do with my external circumstances, right? So you could have everything on the outside, and if that internal condition is not in order, it doesn't matter what I have going on. This is my experience. Doesn't matter what I have going on that seems cool. I'm not going to appreciate it, and I'm not going to be able to be present to it and enjoy the gifts that life had given me. And so I had to take a long, hard look in the mirror. And, prior to even retiring, what I started to realize was that I was a coward and I was selfish. And, I think I talked about this yesterday, that, Dominic Cruz used to warn me about, not wanting to lose in the gym, right? Not wanting to be vulnerable in the gym, not wanting to put myself in bad positions in the gym. And he said, you got all this ability, but man, if you don't let yourself lose, like you're just not going to be as good as you could be. And my ego wouldn't let me lose in the gym because I wasn't getting fights. I was having my fights in the gym, well, maybe I'm not fighting, but I pieced up this guy and he's a top 10 in the UFC, but no one gives a fuck what happens in the gym, right? But I didn't have anything. So that's what I had to, let my ego rest on. And that's where my identity was tied up in these names that I would beat up in the gym. And, there's a lot of guys that happens to. And, embracing vulnerability is a big part of not being a coward anymore, right? So if I take a long, hard look in the mirror, right? And mind you, I'm a street guy. You know what I mean? Like I come from, like, no one wants to admit that they're a coward, right? But I had to tell myself the truth. And so I adopted this policy of brutal honesty and ruthless honesty with myself. And so that what I came up with was that I'm a coward. And what does that mean? It means when I avoid things that I'm afraid of, or that when I'm afraid of something, it debilitates my ability to perform or act in a way that I would be proud of. And so how do I counteract this? Well, I start making myself do and experience the things that I'm afraid of. And in training, in life, in relationships, in all areas of my life. And I just started throwing myself in the fire in all these areas pretty regularly. And I failed a lot, as you can imagine. And But I would be learning, and I think like self-esteem is not just a given thing, right? So whenever I would, take on a challenge, whether I met the challenge or didn't, but as long as I threw myself in some kind of fire, I'd be proud of myself, and if you can do that regularly, you start to gain some confidence too. Like I started to feel proud that I was a guy that would do things that I was afraid of. Like, being a coward doesn't mean you're not, or the opposite of a coward is not to not be afraid, right? It's just to be afraid and go ahead and do it anyway. Like that's what actual courage is. And, I started to see the value in accountability, like personal accountability. And that is my greatest weapon in life, is my ability to be accountable. Because, and this is something I talk with my fighters about all the time. If I need the world to act a certain way for me to be okay, and this is true even now, even though I'm told that I can't work, right? If I need the world to treat me a certain way in order for me to be okay, that means I gave the world the power over whether my life is good or bad, right? I don't want anybody having that power. I don't want you guys to have that power. I don't want my wife to have that power. I don't want employers to have that power over me. So I'm accountable for whether my life is good or not anybody else, right? How I react to things, I'm 100% accountable for it. My parents, did they do the best job? Not really. They did the best they could, but I'm accountable for what my life looks like now, not them. Because if I had to sit here and wait for my parents to do a better job, I'll never, like that shit's over. There's nothing they can do about that. That ship has sailed. So I can't wait for them, right? No one's going to save me. No one's going to bet on me if I don't bet on myself, right? And so I had to start really just investing in myself and doing this. And so by the time it was time for me to retire, I had lost that chip on my shoulder because I was okay with myself at this point. I didn't achieve or accomplish what I wanted to in a lot of ways. And I realized but that's not who I am. It's, that was a part of my life and a big part of my life, but it doesn't define me. What defines me is what I get up and do every day, and the impact that I can, have on people's lives. And so I, fell into this coaching role. Guys had always sort of kind of followed what I was doing at Top Team anyway. I became, a leader in the gym. And then when I retired, I sat down with Boyd and became, we decided that, that I would take on the role as the head coach, and, we'd really try to push the fight team. And, we had a really incredible first year that I was there. I mean, we had Jingnan Zhang won the one championship women's title that year. I had Terry Brazier win 2 BAMA world titles that year. And, a bunch of other guys did really well all around the world. And so things were going well. And so stepping into that role as a coach was also a huge learning process. And I had a blast while I was doing it. And I had to learn a lot. I still had quite a bit of an ego, and I was still training with the guys and getting into fist fights during sparring sessions. And, I'm not sure if I mentioned that yesterday in the beginning or not, but yeah, all kinds of crazy stuff and being a bit overbearing at times. But it was, just all a lesson. And so when I work with fighters now, it's, if they're going to work with me and I'm going to be their coach and they really want what it is that I have, then we're going to take a look at what scares them. And if not, then I'm probably not the coach for you. I mean, I'll help you technically and you can take my classes and all that's cool. But if you really want me to be a coach and a mentor, you have to be willing to take a look at the things that scare you and be willing to be thrown into that fire. Because I believe that's what it takes to be a champion. And not just that, but that's what it takes to be successful in life. Because you know what? I wouldn't want to develop a champion like John Jones, who I believe is a sociopath. And that's why he does the things he does. But so he's a champion and he's probably the greatest fighter that's ever lived, but his life is a fucking disaster. So what good is being the greatest fighter of all time if you can't not get behind the wheel drunk and drive around with guns in your car when you have millions of dollars? You know what I mean? Like, and you know, I wish the best for him, and I love watching him fight, but I wouldn't want a fighter like that. I wouldn't want to be responsible for coaching or mentoring a fighter like that. And so, like, if you can't have this is a whole thing for me. I believe martial arts is really important, and part of being a martial artist is not only how you conduct yourself, you know, when you're fighting and training, but how you conduct yourself outside the cage is really important to me. At least what your personal life looks like, and how you feel about yourself. So it's really important to me that all of that is a work in progress with the people that I work with.
Yeah, I think a lot of that resonates with me. I have had my own addiction problems, and you know, I'm on that path myself, and I've been down the road. I probably haven't thought about it as much as you have, but I've kind of found myself kind of in a similar spot to where you are, without breaking it down into its minute portions. Like like you've obviously analyzed it and realized where you need to improve, and I've kind of organically stumbled down that path. And one of the main things I take away from your and most successful people that I speak to is that you have to fail, and you have to be prepared to fail like multiple times before you succeed, you know. And I think most, if not all, successful people would share that path of, there's definitely been a lot of failures in most successful people's lives. And I think that's what people forget, is you're never going to succeed all the time. Like,
yeah, it's definitely not. Yeah, it's a lot of failing. It's mostly failing. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Well, it's mostly, you know, and you have these occasional wins, and hopefully they lead you to a better place. But and it's just being willing to embrace that vulnerability. You know, there's this woman who gives talks on vulnerability. Her name is Brene Brown. If you ever get a chance to check out her TED talk on vulnerability, but you know,
I've seen that.
Yeah. When I, you know, she says something to the effect of, when I shut myself off from, you know, vulnerability, and I also shut myself off from all the good things as well. So yeah, I might protect myself from the dangers, but if I don't take any risks, I don't get the emotional rewards either. I don't get, you know, if I'm afraid to be vulnerable in relationships, I won't have good relationships, because good relationships aren't just good all the time, or deep, meaningful relationships aren't just good all the time, right? They take fucking work, you know. Even good friendships, you know, if you got a good friend, man, you've probably had some fallouts, you know what I mean? And just, you know, at times where you get upset with each other about things. But the thing about a friendship is that you're willing to work on it, you know, and admit, you know what, man, I was wrong, I fucked up, you know. But if I'm one of those people that, you fucking wronged me, and I just cut you off flat, I mean, I suppose there's times where maybe that's warranted, but if that's a regular pattern, that the moment there's trouble, I cut people off, I mean, I don't think that's a good friend. You know, that's a person, I think I'm being a coward. I think I'm avoiding, you know, disappointment. And guess what? If I'm dealing with human beings, I'm going to be disappointed. You know, like, people are fallible, man. They will let you down. Like, if you're my friend, I'm going to let you down at some point. I promise you that. So please don't hold me to this perfect standard, because I'm going to fucking fail. And I try to do the same with people. Like, you know, if somebody's just untrustworthy, well, you know, it's good to have boundaries and set yourself up like that. But I think, it's important for me to embrace vulnerability in every aspect of my life, because if there's no risk, there's no reward, right? There's literally, there's nothing on the other side of a lack of risk. And I learned that the hard way. You know, I think that really cost me having the fight career that I wanted to have, on top of a lot of other things that it cost me. But yeah, if there's no risk, there's no reward.
I say to the lads in the gym sometimes, you know, that you can see a fighter when they've had a bad day in the gym, and you know them that well, that you know that they're off, and they're getting bested by people they're not normally best and stuff. And I'll always sit the group down at the end and say, look, if you don't have bad days, how are you going to know what a good day is? It's always just going to be a day, you know.
Yeah.
So you've got to have these bad days to make you appreciate the good days, because without the bad, there's no good. There's just it,
Yeah.
whatever it
Yeah,
is.
exactly. Yeah. Like appreciating it all. You don't gotta love having your bad days, but I think it's important to value it. I think it's important to put it in perspective. Look, a bad day is either a poor me day or it's a lesson learned day, right? And a lesson learned day is money in the bank, right? And the more money I put in that bank, obviously, I think the better things look in the long term. So those bad days have to happen, man. I hate them. I fucking question, my worth and my existence every single time they happen, but I also appreciate them. I don't let them keep me down. And I have to take a look at, what value can I take out of this? Because if I take out is, oh, I suck, that's not going to help me. That's not going to help fighters that I work with. So it's really important to appreciate all that stuff, the good and the bad.
And it shows a good strength of character as well. I mean, the people who fail continually and but just keep working away at it, it shows that they've got a stronger strength of character and have pride in what they do and what they want to achieve, rather than having an ego and failing at something and just do hard basket and going and doing something else. Something that's easier, that they're going to succeed in much easier and they're not going to fail at. That's the ego. But pride is failing and failing and failing and just keep working away at it until you're happy with yourself and you're happy with what you've achieved.
Absolutely.
The key is to learn the lesson from the failure. Like that's the key. That's the gold in it. Is like, if you keep failing but you don't learn anything, and you just keep plowing through and doing the same shit over and over and over again, then you're wasting your time. But if I remember, I'd gotten myself on the wrong side of the law, and I had a long trial, and it was sentencing day. And my dad, I come from a very straight-laced family. They're all very well-to-do and stuff. So this was out of their comfort zone completely. But kind of, unfortunately for them, I'd made it a bit like their comfort zone. So I remember my dad, this was a big one, and I remember my dad coming to me before we were just about to walk into the court for the sentence. And he said to me, son, you've made a lot of mistakes in your life, but to this point, you've learned from every single one of them. Make sure you learn from this one and you don't do this again. And that advice coming from him in that time, like, I know he was probably a little bit embarrassed about the shame I brought in the family or whatever.
Sure.
But for him to offer that advice, it's always stuck with me. Is that as long as I don't do this again, and I haven't, I've never ended back in that same position again.
Yeah.
That's the key to me.
Yeah, I think so. One of the things, one of my gripes with the way the current Western schooling system is like, it's not a system that encourages mistake making, right? And I think a lot of parents on large discourage mistake making, and I think a lot of coaches I've done it myself, discourage mistake making. And so if I look back on my life, how have I learned? Almost solely from making mistakes, right? Almost solely from making mistakes do I learn lessons, or do I learn anything, right? Never. Even if you're good at something or have natural ability, you still make mistakes that you learn from. They might vary in severity, but so why at large do we avoid mistake making so much, right? And I would challenge people that are listening to think about that. Think about your life. Think about if you avoid making mistakes, and why do you avoid making them, right? I know for me, I was not allowed to make mistakes because I would catch hell from my father. If I didn't, wash the dishes the way he liked, I would have to be walking on eggshells the whole time. And so to this day, if I make a mistake, my first instinct is to, I don't want to be reprimanded. I don't want to reprimand myself. Like I shot, but I have to slow down and be present to the fact that making mistakes is how literally every lesson worth learning is stumbled upon. It never just fucking comes out of nowhere. It comes from trial and error. So why do I avoid mistakes like the plague, when that's where all the good stuff happens? That's where all the learning happens. That's where all the improvement happens. And so I think that's really important. And I hope fighters really take that to heart. Like, go out there and make mistakes, you know, go out there in the training room and don't be afraid to try stuff. Like don't be afraid to lose in the gym, you know. It's really important that you go after stuff and get out of your comfort zone as often as possible. And to the degree that you can do that and allow yourself that space, I think is, you know, you greatly increase your capacity for growth. And man, the thing is, we have such a short window to fight, you know, to actively fight. I mean, martial arts can last a lifetime, but fighting is a short window, man. It's, if you're lucky, you have a 10, 15-year career. Like that's, I mean, most people don't fight that long, you know. They take a few fights and decide, this isn't for me. You know, I got to get a job. But however long you're going to do it for, man, I would really encourage you to, that capacity for growth, make it as big as possible. You know, make all the mistakes you can, enjoy this ride, and have as much fun as you can.
Yeah, I'm gonna lighten it up a little bit. I watch your Instagram stories a lot, and you put a lot of the music stuff on there. How cool was it, like, growing up in the 90s with that musical era where you grew up? Like, it must bring you back there every time you hear those tracks that are still so popular to this day. Like, it must take you right back to that those times you had as a kid growing up.
Yeah, it's really something special to me. So I grew up in a very interesting neighborhood, right? So I grew up on a horseshoe, 2 blocks. So I grew up on North Pequottic, and around the corner was Lincoln Boulevard, right? So my street was all, I'd say, middle class, like white skater kids, like punk rockers and shit. And then around the corner, you go around the corner, and it was all black and Puerto Rican. And crack houses on the corner, prostitution, like, you know, it was a wild scene. It was real weird, but everybody in the neighborhood kind of kicked it together. And so I had a lot of influence from all that stuff. So my music taste is actually, it's pretty wide. Like, most people know that I'm a big hip hop head, but I had a lot of punk influence. I had a lot of different types of influence, but my first love is 90s hip hop, 90s New York hip hop in particular. And yeah, it's just a feeling that goes along with that music and in that era, and just, you know, just being on a corner, you know, drinking a 40 with the boys and smoking blunt, and you know,
sounds like a rap song in itself.
Yeah, but that's what it was, man. I mean, that's literally what we were doing. We'd hang out, you know, St. Ides and Old English, and we'd be, you know, rolling blunts and hanging out. And if somebody rolled through that we didn't know, you know, we, at the very least, we're gonna rob them, if not stomp them out, you know. And it was just that was just that, the streets back then. And that might sound fucked up to people that, you know, live in Perth or whatever. But man, just, you know, yeah, there was just a vibe, and it's such a golden era. And maybe it's because I come from that era, but it's so timeless to me. Like, you know, my wife is 25 years old, right? And she's from Singapore, but she listens, somehow her taste in hip hop is impeccable. Like, she vibes off all the same stuff. And so, like, when I play the stuff that, now basically it's the same stuff she listens to, but like when I kind of put her onto that music, like, it made sense to her too. And she just, you know, it was such a creative time. It was a time where you wanted to be different, and not have a cookie cutter sound. And it was telling a story of, you know, kind of what was going on before it got glorified and kind of took on, you know, lost the genuine feeling of it, you know, which happened somewhere in the late 90s, early 2000s. It started to lose that genuine feel. But yeah, man, it just, you could capture the sound of the street, and it always feels good to me. Like when a certain, like, bass line and some drums come in, like, yeah, I can't help myself. Like, it just takes me over.
Yeah, I think I think at A Tribe Called Quest Day yesterday. I mean, 90s New York hip hop was.
Yeah.
You had Wu-Tang, Mobb Deep, and Quest, and it's just all different styles as well. Just so good.
All day, every day.
Do you know what made me think about it? It was Jay-Z has a line, and I can't remember it exactly, but it's like, to try and to fail is the I can't remember the
that's from H to Izzo. Yeah, that's from Izzo. Yeah, I know the line you're talking about, and I can't quote it offhand, but I know exactly the line you're talking about.
But he's on the same, like, it's a common thing, but it's still so far from people's minds. It's like, you've got to fail at things, you've got to fuck up, you've got to put yourself out there, otherwise you're just going to live this fucking ordinary life. Like,
and nobody wants that.
Now that guy's a mogul. Jay-Z went from selling crack and Marcy projects to he's a entertainment powerhouse now.
Yeah.
He owns Def Jam now, does he not? Did he buy Def Jam?
I think he's part owner of Def Jam, if not owner. He's got a piece of the New Jersey Nets. He's got his money all over the place. So yeah, he's a titan in entertainment. It's pretty remarkable what that guy's done.
Yeah, and I think it must have been pretty good in the 90s in New York with him and growing up with him and Nas, and the rivalry there between the two.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was a Nas guy when Jay and Nas were beefing. I love both, but I was always a Nas guy. Like Illmatic's probably my what I consider the greatest album of all time is Illmatic, and I'm not alone in that either. I think that's a fucking masterpiece, and yeah, it was a great time for music. The rap beefs and the battles, and it was I don't think it'll ever be duplicated. The problem with the internet, right? And this is what kind of, even from underground clubs. So I was real big into like the underground club scene as well, like underground, like tech house, and with the coming on of the internet, there's no underground anymore. You can find out about whatever you want. Like if you wanted to go to a party back in the day, you needed a flyer.
Yeah.
Right. You couldn't look the party up, and so there was this kind of, and even with hip hop, it was like before it got mainstream, it was like, this is ours. Like it felt like this is ours, and then with the internet, it's like you don't have to wait for the radio to play your song so that you can record it on your tape deck, right? And so you make your own little mixtape, but you have to wait for the radio to play that song so you can record it. Like now, you can just steal it. You don't even have to buy it, or you can stream it. Have any song you want at the. I miss buying even CDs, just owning a CD or a tape so that I could have the booklet, and I would, study the credits and the artwork in the booklet, and it was. Yeah, it was just there was something real nice about that, and all that stuff in that era just had a like, felt like nobody else knew about it. Like we had something that no one else had or knew about or had access to, So it was real special, and yeah, I'm just lucky that I got to live at least part of that and have that as a part of my experience growing up.
Yeah, well, the internet has changed all that. Obviously, with us being promoters, we're on the opposite side of the coin now. We want to push everything in front of everybody. We want everyone to be able to see as many people as possible. But it dilutes it in a different way from that. It dilutes it in a way that people can sit and wait and they'll see it on YouTube. They can watch the pay-per-view from home. Whereas back then, exactly as you say, you wanted to go to this rave, you picked up a flyer at a record store, your mates in the landline, or it's waiting. There was 30 of you making your way there with a cargo. It was a different time.
Yeah. Different times for sure, man. It's lucky. When you have access to everything at your fingertips, it's. At least for me, it's much harder to appreciate things.
Yeah,
when they're easy.
I had this conversation with the wife the other day, and we grew up in such a good time. Like there was just the right amount of technology, but not too much. So you still got to spend and the world wasn't like it is now. So you could spend all day out as a kid. You could go out in the morning, first thing. And then your parents would ring your mates to see, and then they'd find out where you were across the grapevine of the mums. It's like, oh yeah, they were here half an hour ago. You know, you'd climb trees and you'd make rope swings, and we would anyway. We weren't. We had a slightly different upbringing probably, but we were running around like fucking idiots all day. The street lights came on, we went home. You know, and now I think the kids are going to miss out on that. You know, they're going to sit and, you know, it's not safe enough for them to run around all day.
Here's the thing with that I think is funny. I think the world is safer than it's ever been. If you study every metric, like across the board, right? Especially in fucking Australia, right? Australia is like the safest place on earth. I'm sure it has its problems, but the world is the safest it's ever been. Yet parents don't let their kids out on a whole, right? And I'm not a parent, so, you know, but why? Because all of the world's bad is in your face all the time. So if you stay on social media long enough, you'll think the world is ending all the time. I mean, coronavirus stuff aside, I know a lot of people that don't let their kids out at all. And I'm like, the world is so safe right now. It's safer than it was when I was a kid. Way safer than it was when I was a kid. My neighborhood now, I go there now, I'm embarrassed of how safe it is. You know, I'm like, this is, I really, it kind of irritates me. But isn't that I think that's a really curious thing, that the world by every metric is the safest it's ever been. But ask parents if they let their kids around the neighborhood, and I can't, you know, I'm not a parent, so I can't say what I would do, right? But most parents won't let their kids, you know, wander freely through the neighborhood.
I mean, if I was still in London, I wouldn't let them out. It's a bit different here. London is a crazy place, but like here, I see kids out and about, and they ride their bikes to the shops, and so it's a bit better here. So yeah, it's probably something of our own making, to be honest. It's like,
I believe so. Yeah, I think just the internet will make you think that there's a pedophile on every corner, or that somebody's gonna abduct your child. You know, I mean, that stuff could happen. That stuff could happen anyway. Leave your kids sitting home on a computer long enough, and some weirdo on a chat site doesn't hit them up.
And look, I've got two daughters, and I grew up obviously in the west coast of Scotland, in a very deprived town that had that wasn't the safest place in the world either. But growing up in Australia, I've had no issue at all. I've let my kids go out and do whatever they wanted. You know,
they were going anyway, mate, whether you let them or not.
from a very young age, you know, just told them to do the right thing, and it's made them the people that they are just now. They make a lot of smart decisions. They're street smart as well, and you know, to the stage where, you know, I'll be sitting in Surfer's Paradise at midnight and 1 o'clock in the morning. My 14-year-old daughter would come walking past me, and I'd be like, "What are you doing?" Just have a quick chat with her, tell her to be safe, do the right thing, and go home. And look, the two of them are great kids. You know, nothing's happened to them.
Yeah, well, I think you build people of strong character like that by allowing people to make decisions. If we don't allow people to learn and learn from their own mistakes, like we were talking about before, and you know, bump their head a little bit, we're raising weaklings. I think, you know, I think we raise weak people if we do that.
People that don't know how to make decisions, and people that don't know how to assess the changing of atmospheres in certain situations as well. You know, and yes.
Mate, I'll tell you what though, it's so fucking hard. Like, because the fucking, my daughter's 4 and she's amazing, and the love I have for her is like, I want to wrap her up in cotton wool because I never want anything to happen to her, but there's a little piece of me that wants to push her out the door as well and go. And I know she's 4, but like, even like her best mate lives next door, and I even walk her up the hill to her house, like when I should just go, go. But it's so hard, man. I'll be honest. Like, I want to wrap her up and keep her in my house for the rest of her life because I don't ever want anything to happen to her.
I think it's weird, right? It's like if you come from, everybody interesting I know comes from struggle, right? Nobody I've met that's interesting or that I want anything to do with has just like everything's gone well like the whole time. And then the instinct as a parent, right, or even with people that you love or whatever, is to protect them at all costs, but not realizing that like with that overbearing protection, whatever it is, I actually weaken that person And I don't allow them to kind of grow to their full potential when I do that, whether it's a fighter, whether it's my wife, whatever it is, right? Anytime I start, because I think those are my fears and my anxieties. And these people are going to have to grow up to be adults at some point. And whatever happens when we're young is really going to shape us in the long run. If we grow up feeling like we're strong and capable, well, we're probably going to grow up to be strong and capable. If I feel like there's a fucking trap door around every corner, you're going to tiptoe through life and probably be scared to take healthy risks. And I don't envy people that are parents, because I think it's so hard to do a perfect, it's impossible to do a perfect job, right? You do the best you can. You let people know that you love them and hope that they turn out okay and that you don't damage them too bad, right? But it's not an easy job.
Yeah. I feel completely differently about my son and my daughter, though. That's the thing. Like, with him, I'm a bit, and he's really young. He's like 7 months old, but I'm already like, oh, yeah, off you go, mate. Like, I don't have the same, whereas with her, like, there's just a father-daughter thing that I just want to protect her. Like,
I'm sure that's natural too. I'm sure there's part of your physiology and your.
But I also think that's part of the problem with men not ever not fully feeling comfortable, like, being who they are, because they're told from a young age they fall over. If my daughter falls over, I'm going to pick her up, I'm going to give her a cuddle, I'm going to say, you're going to be okay. If my son falls over down the track, I'm probably going to go, get up, mate, come on, what are you doing? Like, and we're building these different mindsets for them to live in, where what's okay for a young boy is not necessarily, this is how I feel about it anyway.
Sure,
but this is a completely different conversation. But it's really tough to try and treat a male the same way as you treat a female without wanting to sound like a full fucking misogynist or whatever. Eric, were you part of Jeremy's camp for Marcus Davis back in the day?
No, I believe, he might have still been at Militich. So Jeremy didn't get with us until maybe into 2011. He came to Alliance, I think, I want to say. That was late 2011, that fight. It was like the New Year's Eve show. Man, that might have been just before he got to us. I think he was still with Victory before he got with, which was like Dean Lister's gym. Still in San Diego, but him and Miles Jury were both over at Victory for a long time. And then at some point around 2011, they got with us, but I don't believe I was with him for that fight. Well, I had he knocked Marcus Davis out. And then I remember. I was staying in the Hard Rock Hotel, and he was staying there as well, or he was there. We ended up having dinner after the fight with him. He's a great guy. Like, what a night. He was, even back then, he was such a smart dude. Yeah. Jeremy is, we were main training partners for a few years. So I've banged out a lot of rounds with Jeremy, and, we'd argue and fight, and he'd get pissed off and I'd get pissed off, and we'd talk shit to each other endlessly. But we were really close training partners for many years. And, as I've taken a bigger role in his camps now, on quite a few different things. But yeah, we have a really good relationship, and he's another guy that Jeremy's been in the UFC for a long fucking time. And he hasn't won them all, you know what I mean? But the guy's still ranked in the top 10 right now. Yeah. That's pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing for the longevity of a puncher, right? So the guy's, if you described him, mostly you'd have to look back, you'd say, okay, he's a puncher, but he also has a tremendous amount of technical ability that you don't often see you've seen it in a few fights. I think it's Gil when he beat Gil, Melendez, that was a pretty good technical display. And then he's had a few fights where he's let it show, but this was the first time I've seen him look like that in a while, and he's still such an open book to learning new information. Takes care of his body. He's still in his early 30s, so I think he's got some good fights ahead of him. I don't think he's got a few fights left. I think he's got some good fights left. With the traction that we have going. He's yeah, he's still learning. He's still learning. And I think as long as a fighter is still open to adding tools, sharpening things up, I think that there's no counting them out. I think when fighters are just, they know what they're good at and that's what they're going to do. And they're not really trying to get, better at things, and they just show up to get in shape for fights. I think you're collecting a paycheck at that point. And if that's what you want to do, cool, but I see it all the time, man. I see veterans that just don't want to get better. And that's cool. Like that's what they want to do. I don't think they're going to be around much longer, or, their best days are probably behind them at that point. But as long as you're still learning, I think anything's possible. So I'm excited to see what we have moving forward for him.
And he's so much fun to watch. People still enjoy him. People love watching him. He's
I mean, he's been in the UFC for a long time for a reason, and the UFC loves him, and he's consistent. And yeah, man, if that guy hits you at a few different weight classes, man, you're probably gonna go to sleep, dude. He hits fucking hard.
Yeah. Also, testament to who he is the fact that he's on a bit of a slide. He's lost a few, but there's no sign of him going anywhere. So
no, man, no. I mean, he was on a slide going into this fight, and so but look at his fights. I mean, he fought the Russian kid, the Dagestani kid at 145.
Magomed. What's his name? Not Magomedov. What's his name?
No,
Zabit, not Zabit.
Zabit. Right. So he fought Zabit well, right? And Zabit was, man, had that fight been a few more rounds, that would have been big trouble for Zabit. I mean, he was gassing at the end of that fight, and Jeremy stayed with him all the way. I mean, and that guy's a killer. The Yair fight was a little messy, and the training camp was, in Mexico, and the team was a bit split up. So, it's weird. Had the Jeremy that showed up against Qatar showed up against Yair, Jeremy would have blown that kid out of the water, but it is what it is. But so he's making progress. He's making progress and looks like a different fighter. And he fought
Jose Aldo too in that run.
Yeah, and
Jose Aldo, Zabit, and Yair Rodriguez. That's a tough run.
Yeah, and Qatar is the new blood in the division as well. So, they never give him an easy fight at all, and he's never had easy fights, man. He's always fighting the cream of the crop or the new young killer, and most of the time he wins, but sometimes you have a couple tough outings. But I think his trajectory overall is still up. So it's exciting.
Yeah, definitely. Let's go I guess back a little bit and talk a little bit about Phuket Top Team and what it was like living in Thailand and working with the boys and girls over there.
So I mean, Phuket was amazing, and I miss it often. I miss the lifestyle, and wish I would have done some things differently, I think. But I guess hindsight is always like that. I got there in 2010, and I was still fighting at the time, and it was amazing. Like when I first got there, I was incapable of being happy. If things were going well, then I could be in a good mood. But if things were just on a normal keel, I was generally pretty angry. Always not out loud, but blaming my circumstances and why I don't feel good on whatever. I wouldn't blame people out loud. But I would have that attitude of, it's not my fault that things are like this. And so I really didn't get to enjoy that first year. I hated it that first year. I mean, other than, the fact of being financially stable and being able to travel a bit and do all that stuff, that was cool. I wasn't enjoying my life. And so I went home for a brief minute, a couple months, and then I ended up coming back. And when I came back that I sort of fell into the head coach role. I had trained for a couple fights that fell through, and I couldn't put myself through another training camp that wasn't going to happen. And at that time, as I had come back, I started to really do some work on myself. And whatever that chip on my shoulder that was driving me to fight prior to that, that chip was gone. Like, I didn't feel like I had anything to prove anymore to myself, you know? And it was like, if I looked at my career honestly, it was a absolute failure, particularly for what it could have been, right? So it's like, with all that talent, this is what you achieved, which is you know, it was a crime, but I didn't care. I was like, nonetheless, it doesn't mean that, you know, I wasn't a good martial artist, or it doesn't mean that I wasn't even a good fighter. Just, that's the way it worked out. And that's okay. I was okay with myself. And then I started to really embrace coaching, and I always knew I was going to coach. I've always had sort of a knack for explaining things in a few different areas of my life, but explaining technique, explaining fight theory, and understanding, I guess, the more complex parts of MMA and how everything connects together has always just made sense to me. And it's always been fairly easy for me to explain to people. And so the guys always just kind of, even before I was the coach, like I was like the coach, guys would, you know, I set up the workout schedule, I set up the drill sessions, and guys just seemed to follow along. And so I had, you know, I sat down with Boyd and talked about formally becoming the head coach and really kind of, you know, putting my effort into this fight team. And, you know, it was a huge learning process. Like, I still had a lot of personal things that needed to be addressed, and a massive ego, and a, you know, a mean streak. I mean, I would still spar with the guys pretty regularly through most of that time. And, you know, I'd be getting in fucking fist fights in the parking lot after sparring sessions with new guys that were there, because I didn't like the way that they were sparring, and fucking chasing people into the parking lot. It was nuts. Like, I did a lot of crazy shit, but when you're good at things, people fucking let some stuff slide. I don't know. You know, they let a couple things go. And, you know, at some point, coaching was a mirror for me. It was like, when I would do things that I was like, do I really want to be acting like that? You know, in certain ways, or if I would be having, you know, I had a couple kids that I was really invested in there, and sometimes our visions wouldn't match up of where things should be going. And I would have a real hard time if they would resist what my vision was for them, because in my head, I know better. And, you know, I learned you can't fucking force your vision on anybody, right? Everybody's got their own life to live. And that's not my job. It's not my job to force my vision on somebody, right? My job is to, you know, obviously help you to advance technically as fast as possible, right? My job is to help you prepare for fights. My job is to give you the experience that I have. My job is to share my experience, right? But my experience doesn't necessarily, you know, it's not gospel. Like, what's true for me might not be true for you. Now, I'll do my best to sort of give you the cliff notes so that you could not fall into some of the pitfalls that I did. If I identify some cowardice in training, I'm gonna fucking call it out. I'm gonna tell you you're training like a bitch. I'm gonna tell you that you're being a coward. And that if I see that you're afraid of something, I'm gonna make you face that fear. And some guys couldn't handle that. Some guys really didn't want to look at certain things. And so I had to take a step back and say, all right, to what length is it my responsibility to force somebody into the fire, right? Well, I think it's got to be I think it has to be a reciprocating thing. I think that fighter also has to trust me enough to push them in there, right? And some people just don't trust anybody. And if they don't trust, forcing them into that when they're not ready could actually be traumatic, right? It could actually force them further into being afraid than dealing with. Some people just aren't ready to look at certain things, you know? And so through fucking up a lot, there was a lot of wisdom gained through a lot of that stuff, you know? Like, you know, I can't take any of that stuff back. But I wish I wouldn't have been so hard on some guys at a certain point in time. I don't think it was beneficial. And, you know, at the end of the day, I'm there to be of service, right? It's not about me. It's not about me looking good. I mean, yes, I do want to get my name out there and coach champions so that I can make more money. 100% that's true. Like, I ain't doing this for free. But at the end of the day, it's not about me. It's really not. A coach is a service position. You don't really get much fucking glory with it. And that was a hard thing for me to swallow because I have a fucking big ego and I'm insecure and I want fucking, and I want to be recognized. And, but it's not about me. And as long, and if I'm doing it for recognition, I'm doing it for the wrong reasons, my work will suffer, right? My passion will suffer. And I'll begin to think that I'm not getting what I deserve. I'll start to feel like some self-pity. I'll start to feel like a victim. And, that's not a way to, I mean, that's not a leader. A leader, that's not strength. That's not a leader. And so, yeah, these are all lessons I just had to learn, man. You know,
isn't it funny that when you switch that off, it comes anyway? Like,
yeah,
that, you know, you're widely talked about in circles that I roll in as one of the best coaches going around. And that's because you've managed to have the awareness to switch off your ego switch and realize it's about the guys and they're out there as they're a billboard for you, right? So when they're comfortable and a bit happier, then they're producing the results that you wanted all along. Absolutely.
And the thing that I've really started to embrace is that, and this has been a few years running now, and it goes in ebbs and flows, but when guys are having fun, they're making the most gains, right? When you're having fun, you're learning. You're first of all, enthusiasm is contagious, right? So to be in a room full of enthusiastic people, you know, I taught a class this morning, and you know, mixed levels, some real good guys and a lot of beginners, and you know, we're going over leg lock positions, and everybody in the room is having fun because the attitude going into the room was, we're not going to see who's the best right now. Like the idea of this training isn't to win. The idea of this training session is to improve, right? So we're all trying to get better as a cohesive unit. Now that may mean getting tapped. That may mean, you know, getting swept and losing some positions. But I could feel the energy in the room that when I took the ego out of it, guys were just having fun. They're laughing, you know, but in a productive manner, you know, serious enough to where they're taking it serious what they're doing, but having a really good time doing it. And that energy is contagious. Those guys want to come back. We had a bunch of new people that signed up on the spot because they're like, fuck, man, if you don't have that in your everyday life and you get a taste of what it's like to be in a room like that, like, you want to be around it all the time. And so when I can help try to create an environment like that in the room, make it fun, make the intensity fun, make it even hard, make even the hard parts fun. Man, people want to be around that, and it just builds and builds and builds, and that's how you get momentum, you know. And then once you're riding that momentum, everything feels easy, you know. It's tough to keep it like that all the time. Like, you know, we all have personal shit that we're dealing with, and it's hard to bring that energy every day, day in, day out. But I do the best I can. I just got to be aware of myself and do the things necessary to keep myself like running optimally, you know. But yeah, I'm having a good time right now. So
I've kind of got a rule at the gym. Like, I park the car and I get to the doors and I'm like, right, my shit stays in the car park. Like, I have to try and leave everything behind because otherwise I feel I won't give what my customers, my students, my clients and fighters what they deserve. Like, if I'm bringing my shit, they're not coming there to listen to my shit. They're paying to come there and learn and forget about their shit. So I tell all my staff, all my coaches and myself, I just have this little second at the door and I'm like, right, this stuff stays out here and this is a place of, this is our sanctuary, you know, this is where we come to get away from this shit.
Switch and get to work.
Yeah, it's hard. It's really fucking hard. Sometimes you've had a bad day, no sleep and whatever it is. And you've got to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Agreed.
Yeah. So when was your first trip over with Eternal? Was that over to the Gold Coast with Ben?
Yes. Yeah. Gold Coast was my first trip for Eternal. My first Eternal was Gold Coast. Yes. Or was it Perth?
I
I think Gold Coast, we had Ben on the Gold Coast first because that links with Adrian.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't go with him for that fight. I didn't go with him for that
Adam
first fight. I was away for a different camp. I had something big going on that weekend. Otherwise, I would have been there. But I had something going on where I couldn't be there. So Adrian cornered Ben for that fight.
Yeah, that was Adam Russo. That was
Adam
where we
Russo.
first.
I came with Ben for the first fight that we did in Perth. Was with
Luke Jones.
Luke Jones.
Yeah, Luke Jones, when Ben had his knee was torn, and yeah, he went out and still had a really good job. So yeah, that was my first trip, was to Perth actually.
Oh, cool. The Perth's a good spot, and that was the Italian club still, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was great, man. Staying like right in pretty much the city center there, and that was a good time, man. That was a really good time. And then
and that performance, I mean, for Ben to beat Luke Jones, who's one of the best featherweights in the country, on one leg, big, tough, strong,
it's quick
solid
as well. It's quick ways. He's quick.
Yeah,
took him down and down.
It was honestly, man, that was such a weird camp, and that's one of the coaching jobs I'm most proud of. Like, I've cornered some pretty big fights, but what Ben put himself through and where he got himself mentally for that fight was, fuck, man. It was pretty remarkable. Like, I couldn't believe it. But even though I could believe it, like, I was confident in him going into that fight. Like, even though I knew, like, we had to get this done smart, I knew he was going to win that fight. On one leg, I knew he was going to win that fucking fight, as weird as that sounds. I had no doubts. He was a nervous wreck. I didn't know that. You know what I mean? But yeah, he managed to get that done. And like, to this day, it's one of the best performances I've ever coached,
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, he's a special kid, man.
He is a special kid. He had that loss to that tough Kazakh kid, and that kid put on a performance, and I don't think it was one of Ben's best performances. And there was a couple of weird things that went on. I think Ben hurt him with an elbow, and the ref stopped it and said it was behind the head, and sort of the momentum sort of kind of switched from there, because he did have the kid hurt. But the kid did his job and got it done. And I think Ben just mentally had a tough time in that fight. But then, comes back and, puts a boxing clinic on Rodolfo. I think not too long after that.
Over in Melbourne.
Yeah. And, yeah, man, he's, it's one of my only regrets about leaving Phuket is that I don't get to work with him right now. And that kind of bums me out a little bit. He's got a real special place in my heart. And I think we'll always have that bond. So I hope at some point in time I get to work with him again and things line up to do so. But yeah, there's a couple of those guys from over there. Stafford Winston, who fought for you guys, amateur.
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, he's another one. I mean, I've been on 4 continents with that kid. So, we've trained in Asia. We've flew out to Perth. We've trained in England, and he comes over and trains with me in the U.S. For a few months at a time. And he's another massively impressive kid, and he's only an amateur, but he's so cool in there, like doesn't get rattled by nothing. It's really kind of bizarre the way that kid shows up to fights. And I think that the kid that he fought at Eternal wasn't no slouch either. That kid
definitely not. Good. Definitely not. Yeah.
And Stafford kind of had his way with him, and I think he won that fight in the first round, if I'm not mistaken. And
he did,
yeah, and he's just cool, man. He's back there, and man, I work with all kinds of guys. And a lot of guys are just shitting themselves, and Stafford don't give a fuck. He doesn't care if things get hard. He doesn't care. He just works through it at the same pace. And yeah, he's a really talented kid, and he's back home right now and training his ass off in York, and doing what he's got to do. He's busy all the time. He's working on his mobility and gets lessons from my wife, and he is always messaging me about certain technical stuff that he's working on. And yeah, he's another hungry kid, and bunch of those guys. But that Perth trip was amazing. That last Perth trip, I brought.
Yeah, I was going to say that was a lot of fun. You brought Big Terry Brazier came over, and Curtis, and you had a little crew together, and you guys made the most of it.
Dude, we got an Airbnb like overlooking Perth, and we ran that city ragged that weekend, and we tried to steal your ring car girls, and we had a good time. But it was,
we like people to leave with happy memories.
Yeah. Still to this day, like we all talk about that trip, and it was I did like 4 seminars in 3 days. Like that's the money I moved back to America with, really.
Wow.
So it was
that's
a fun. Yeah, that was a once in a lifetime trip. You know, just won't be able to duplicate that. You know, but it was good, man. So we're all real thankful, and like anytime I get the chance to go to an Eternal show, I'm more stoked about going to Eternals than I am about a lot of UFCs, to be honest.
That's nice to hear.
Yeah. And it's just a good vibe for me. It's relaxed, you know. It's fun to go over wherever we're at in Australia. Is always a good time, and I have a lot of friends over there, and I have a decent following as far as seminars in Australia for whatever reason.
Yeah.
So, it's always a good time for me to go over there. So I jump at the chance when they come up.
We're just waiting an international travel to open up then, Eric. We'll get you.
Yeah.
Get a list of fights here.
We had a brief chat about that the other day. I said, if you can find a flight sponsor, I'll bring you over for every show.
Yeah, man. When things get normal, I'll probably be looking to get some guys some fights. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. It's always good to have your little crew around. You bring a certain energy, but it's a nice energy. You know, it's like an excited, we love this shit energy, which is which is good as a promoter, and you know, and having you in a room like with other fighters and other coaches, it sort of they feed off that. So I think it helps. It helps the vibe in the back. And it's funny, your successor from at Phuket Top Team is a former foe of mine that me and Vaughan fought back in the day.
Did you really?
Yeah, I fought him on 2 hours' notice. His opponent didn't show up.
All right.
So I jumped in. I didn't know who he was, what he was. I remember I was eating a sandwich and a packet of crisps on the way down and drinking a chocolate milkshake, just going to corner someone else. And then I always took my mouth guard. I always took my my groin guard. And the promoter put out the bat signal, and I was just only too happy to get involved, and got my ass absolutely fucking handed to me by Vaughan. But I'll never forget, we were told it was a semi-pro fight, so different rule. We were told that. He obviously didn't get the memo. And for him, it was a full pro fight. So, and they told me it was a striker, and the first thing he did was take me down and proceeded to elbow me for about 4 minutes.
All right.
And at one point, my corner was shouting, "There's no elbows." And Vaughan, being the nice bloke that he is, went, "I'm happy to stop elbowing you if you want me." and I was like, I felt like a bitch. So I was like, "No, carry on. The rules is the rules, mate. Just get on with it."
Vaughan's actually one of the nicest human beings I've ever met. And
he is.
It's like, I tell him this all the time. I think it makes him uncomfortable, but I was like, when I hang out with Vaughan, I feel like a piece of shit because he's so nice, and I'll never be that nice.
But when the cage door closes, that niceness goes away. And
yeah, he gets it done, man. He gets it done. He's a unique guy for sure, but he's a fucking sweetheart.
Yeah, he came in the when I was a mess. Like my whole face was a hematoma. Like I was in a bad way, but I was fine. Like internally, just externally, I looked a bit roughed up. The Sunday dinner with my parents the next day was interesting, and they didn't even know I was fighting the night before. I walked in looking like I'd been tortured overnight. But yeah, Vaughan came next door and into the change rooms and checked us out. We've been friends ever since, like from afar, and it's nice to follow his career and see him get to where he got to. And, just a funny memory. So when Ben came over for the Rodolfo fight, that was the first time I'd seen Vaughan since the fight. So
right on.
Yeah, we got to replay that kind of. It was a great memory. I love fighting. I don't care whether I win or I lose. I just like to fight. So
yeah,
it was one of my favorites. That one.
Right on.
Yeah, Vaughan. So Ben's in good hands, which is fantastic.
Yes, definitely.
I look forward to getting him involved again once the travel bans move. He's got a very bright future, and I think we haven't seen 100% Ben yet. I think
no, not even close.
So much more to give.
Not even close, dude. He's particularly talented, man. I mean, you know, I've seen him put a beating on a lot of guys that are in some pretty big shows and some guys that are pretty well known, and I've seen Ben get, you know, more than the better of them in the room, which doesn't always mean anything or everything rather, but yeah, I know what he's capable of, and I think it's yeah, sky's the limit for that kid. I mean, absolutely, I could see him being top 10 in the world at some point in time, and
he's got a great tempo. You know, when he gets started, you know, and he's pushing forward, his tempo's fantastic. Everything that he throws to hurt. You know, everything he's thrown, you know, to cause damage, and his jiu-jitsu is slick. You know, his wrestling and his jiu-jitsu is very slick. You know,
yeah, I think after the first fight with Eternal, people thought he was a Muay Thai guy because he, you know, he went out there and you know, he's a grappler by trade. You know, he just happened to figure out that he's got a ridiculously powerful left kick and he can box. You know, he's taken Muay Thai fights against some guys that are real Muay Thai fighters, and you know, you can go over to Phuket and fight a Muay Thai fight, and until you fight a real Muay Thai fighter, like, it's not so hard. When you fight a real Muay Thai fighter, Muay Thai, in my opinion, is way more dangerous than any of the other combat sports.
I agree.
I
agree.
And Ben went out and thrashed this dude, this crazy Russian guy that you know fights Muay Thai, and Ben brought it to him, and so he'll step into a lot of different arenas, and you know, he's pretty comfortable everywhere. He's an ace on the ground, and he can stand with the best of them. He's got I think one of Ben's strongest things, he's got a very strong sense of range, you know, of where he'll be able to touch you because he's a southpaw, an awkward southpaw, and he'll just be out of the way a lot of the time. So just be out of the way, and then he's touching you, and just letting that stuff build up. But yeah, he's got a unique sense of distance and timing.
And the appreciation of distance that he does have, added to the size of him and the fact that he can get to bantamweight, is going to cause so many issues.
Yeah, that's the thing too. I don't think people realize he's not a featherweight.
Yeah.
He's big boy.
Yeah, he makes featherweight super easy. Like, it's barely a weight cut, you know, so I don't even really consider what he does cutting weight. You know, he diets a little bit and gets his weight down without much of a problem at all. So yeah, I mean, featherweight bantamweight might sting a little bit, but I think he'll be a comfortable bantamweight, and just be very, very big and long at that weight and be a problem to deal with for a lot of guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I always talk about Thai boxing as it's definitely the most painful martial art. Like, I used to live with a Thai boxer, and he was sort of English champion level, and I'd obviously corner him in all his fights. But it was the next 3 days after the fights. Like, I'd get him home, I'd have to shave his head, put super glue in all his cuts, you know, and then carry him around the house for 3 days because his legs were gone, you know, like. Yeah. And they do it for peanut. He used to give the Thai boxers are a strange breed. Like, he used to give all his money to the military charity, like his purse money and stuff.
Yeah,
we would Thai because he loved it. Like,
we would have a rule. So, like, if you fought Muay Thai in Phuket, you get like 5,000 baht, which is like 150 US. It's not a lot of money. Maybe a little bit more than 150 US. So we would just make whoever fought spend it on, you know, at a bar that night. You know, you get your little purse money, and then you got to take the boys out for a night. So, yeah, it was a good time. But man, fighting Muay Thai hurts, dude. It hurts a lot. Even if you win fairly easily, it still hurts the next day. Like, the shin on shin and kicking through bones, and yeah, dude. And you know, there's always the threat of, like, it's weird because the way they score it, it's a game. You know, like there's that little bit of element of tag to the scoring of Muay Thai, until somebody elbows the shit out of you, you know, or you see somebody get knocked out clean, and it's a fuck. You're not going to get rich fighting Muay Thai either, you know, so you really got to love it.
No, I've got a world champion in my gym, and I think he got $4,000 for his world title fight, and he had to sell 15 tables to get that, you know.
Yeah, that's crazy.
There's a lot of decent Thai promotions came and had good level of production in the last few years, but it's a sport that just never takes off. You know, even kickboxing as well, you know, compared to boxing and MMA, for some reason, on television, you know, they just don't seem to take off and attract the same level of sponsorship. And same sort of
which
money.
is strange to me because I love watching Glory.
Yeah.
Like,
Same.
I would rather watch Glory than 90% of boxing fights, you know? I'd rather watch Glory than a lot of MMA fights too, man. Fucking, I really appreciate, like, I don't know, like, kickboxing's hard, dude. If you ever, I'm sure you guys have moved around with, like, world-level kickboxers. It's like, fuck, thank God there's takedowns, you know what I mean, in real life.
Well, the thing with Glory is, you know, it takes out a lot of the stalling tactics from Thai, you know, without the clinch. And, you know, there's a lot more action there in it.
Yeah.
But it's not nearly as brutal as the Thai. And you look at some of the Lion fight shows that there had been over the last few years as well. And some of the Kevin Ross and, you know, people like that they brought through are fantastic to watch. But for some reason, it just, you know, didn't get any traction.
Yeah, I guess it's maybe not as accessible as other sports are to some people, so it's just a little bit. It stays like a fringe thing. I don't know why, man.
I think one FC are doing a good job of getting it into the limelight. They have such big viewership. Because they do it for free. That you get to see a lot of high level Thai boxing in the small gloves, which I don't like, if I'm honest.
I think the thing with one is that only the Eastern Hemisphere watches that.
What, you mean there's not 7 billion people watching it like chat?
No, trouble, but those numbers are severely inflated.
Never.
Did you see those numbers where they came out where they were saying like one has more viewers?
Yeah, 5.3 billion or something.
Billion.
Yeah.
Most of the planet hasn't seen one championship because no one in America watches it. No one cares.
Most of Asia hasn't seen it.
We don't. No one watches it. You go to a one championship event, all those tickets are given away.
Yeah, that's true. We've had verification of that here as well.
It's a weird one. I mean, I'm glad they exist because they do some good things for the sport. But I think those numbers are a bit misleading.
A lot of those countries, it's like China and their corona numbers. You know, it's like of course that's correct. It's like who's verifying that information?
Exactly. Yeah.
But no, definitely some good fights on there to watch.
Oh, great!
Yeah,
I love it.
Have good fights.
Yeah, I love it. All right, so we've taken up a fair amount of your time, and I know you've got celebrations to do. Although teetotal celebrations still as much fun as.
No, man. You know what, dude? Like I've been sober for almost 16 years, and I was a lot cooler when I was drinking and doing drugs. But
probably to your friends, probably not to the random guy in the bar.
I guess to me probably, and not even to my friends had to deal with the fucking mess that would get created. But it's you know, I enjoy different things. That, you know, my wife and I just moved about 300 meters from Sunset Cliffs, which is like it's this area in San Diego where you basically like walk out. There's these cliffs and there's waves like crashing on the cliffs, and there's a lot of nature. I got like parrots flying outside my window, waking me up every morning. And wow. What the things I appreciate now are a lot different. So like wild nights for me, I mean, they barely. The last time I had a really wild one was probably Perth, if I'm honest, where we were up and at it and going out all night and training. You know, that was my old lifestyle. But I'd like to sit, write, meditate, work on my future projects that I want to start getting into. And you know, I don't think I'm going to coach forever. I think I'll coach for another few years, and there's some other things that I want to do, and areas that I want to be creative. So, but yeah, I enjoy the slower things and just a little bit more of a appreciative, slower lifestyle. And my wife's very much the same. But I do like watching the boys go out and tie one on, and that shit's still funny as hell to me when it's time to go out and get messy. I still think it's hilarious. It's just not a part of my life anymore, and but I appreciate it and I support it.
I think Cam knows what I'm going to say here, but I'd actually been sober 2 months when I went over to Eternal, and one of my boys fought and got a win. And Cam, it was back in the day where Cam would take the entire Eternal takings to the pub afterwards and get the boys. So they were like, they were like 11 Jaeger bombs deep each, and then I'm the duty driver, and it's 5 a.m, and I'm like, I actually rang the guy that is kind of a mentor to me with my sobriety. He's in the UK, and I was like, bro, it's going to be easier for me to have a drink than deal with these fuckwits for the next few hours. And he was like, he goes to me, just picture the scene in the morning. Your shoes have got no shoelaces in them because the police have taken them. You're sitting in the cell, you know. Like, and I was like, all right, fair enough. I'll stick with it, because fuck me, it was a messy night. But it was a lot of fun in the beginning, and then I was just dealing with these 2 fucking idiots.
Yeah, that's my move now. Is I'll take the guys out. They'll start getting messy, and then I just pull the Irish goodbye at some point during the night and just fucking vanish. And you know, as soon as it starts getting more than I want to, not that I'm uncomfortable around it, but it's like at a certain point in time, it starts taking a turn into the darkness. You know what I mean?
Yes, it does. Yeah. And it's hard to embrace that when you're not there as well. Like,
yeah,
it's not as fun.
I like the laughing part, you know, where it's funny. Once it starts getting dark and, you know, the dry goods start coming out, I gotta go home. You know?
Yeah. No, I was unfortunately I was driving these 2 fucking idiots home, so there was no way that I was leaving.
Yeah, that's a tough spot.
We picked up a few extra customers for the ride home as well.
Yeah, it was a bit of a busier drive home than I'd imagined. I just had Ryan with the seatbelt on, but he was pretty much unconscious. So every time I turned the corner, it was like Ferris. Who was that guy? Weekend at Bernie's. It was like a dead bloke was in the front, and Cam was in the back. We won't talk about that. But yeah, it was one of those nights where it really tested me. But to be honest, that was probably quite helpful for the rest of it, because I was like, if I can get through this, I'm good. You know.
Yeah, I was bouncing in nightclubs through once I was 10 months sober, and did it for like 6 or 7 years, like in the most chaotic circumstances you could absolutely imagine, after hours and all that stuff. And I loved it. At that time, I loved the chaos. Like, the more I still liked chaos at that time, and I'd like going as dark as people wanted to go. I just wasn't going to put anything in my body. But yeah, it's, you know, I guess it's a learning process for the individual. But, yeah. I wouldn't go back if I could. I don't think.
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, probably not. But there's, you know, like, you know, you never recreate some of those nights without the help of alcohol or whatever you were putting into your body. Yeah, I'm happy to leave mine firmly locked in the past. I've got to be honest. It's nice to open up the door and have a look every now and again, but I don't think I want to jump through the door and get stuck in.
Agreed.
I think I'm all good. Plus, I think I'd be divorced and lose access to my children pretty quickly if that were to happen. So.
Well, I'm already divorced, so I'll get through the door for both you boys.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thanks for taking one for the team, buddy.
Yeah.
All right. We'll so we won't take up too much of your time. We just do these little questions. We just do we fly through some like one word questions. So just need a 1-word answer.
Yeah.
Cam, have you got yours up?
I don't. I was waiting on you resending them to me.
I'll send them to you now.
Yuri.
We'll have to change the first one because you've probably got no interest in AFL, have you? Do you even know what it is?
Yeah. It's the rugby, right?
Well, kind of, the question would be AFL or rugby, so they're kind of different. But
yeah, I'd say the NFL.
Yeah.
So many types of football.
There is.
And only one of them we use our feet.
So we'll just skip that first question out. You might like the second question better anyway. All right. So Cam, do you want to start?
No, you started last week. You start this week.
All right, first question we're going to go in as we mean to go on. Tits or ass?
Ass all day.
Blonde or brunette?
Brunette.
KO or submission?
Submission.
Steak or salad?
Steak.
Dog or cat?
Dog.
Restaurant or pub? It's an easy one.
Restaurant for me.
5-round war or 5-second KO?
5-round war.
Cardio or weights?
Cardio.
The beer or wine is the next one. I'll go
Beer.
Coke or sparkling water.
Oh no, well, yeah. I mean, I'd prefer beer over wine. I was never much of a wine drinker. Yeah.
You don't strike me as one either.
Nah.
And I would say that's the last of the relative questions, because the next one was holding or forward, which is a big thing in Australia, but obviously doesn't have much impact for you.
What did you think of Gaethje Ferguson while we're talking?
Oh man, I thought it was brilliant. I was really impressed with Gaethje's distancing, and it was cool because I saw how even on the lead up, the all access grant or whatever the embedded and stuff, watching Trevor Whitman, if you go back and watch it, he's working on his footwork and he's telling him smaller steps, and this is a big thing that I'm big on when I'm getting people to correct their footwork. And because he was taking those small steps, he was always in the right position to land those shots. So he wasn't like, when he was landing these big shots, he wasn't overcommitting. You know what I mean? Like, he wasn't too close or too far away. He was always just in the right spot he needed it. Man, he landed probably 10 or so punches that would have knocked out anybody else in across a few different weight classes. You know what I mean? Those were punches that are life-changing punches that he hit Ferguson with, and he hit him with probably 10 of them where I think anybody else would have gone down. So his distancing, his timing, and his footwork. And when we're talking about footwork, I'm not talking about moving around all crazy. Footwork to me is being in the right position to do what you need to do at that time, right? So you could have great footwork and not move much. You know, you're just in position to land a punch with and keep your balance and be able to, you know, to do the things that you need to do. So I thought that was brilliant. I thought Trevor Whitman did a fantastic job. Obviously, Gaethje to go out and fight that fight. So it's like Ferguson normally takes those beatings and then just wears you out, you know. Whitman, brilliantly enough, had him take, you know, a certain percentage off his punches so that he wasn't getting tired, and he was able to kind of keep up that pace, you know, until it got stopped at the end of the fight. But you know, Tony is a bizarre human being that he can take that kind of punishment, and Justin Gaethje is the real interesting fight to me against Khabib.
Yeah, I mean, I think so too.
You know, especially with the wrestling background that Gaethje's got, that nobody's actually
he's an All-American.
Seen yet. You know, he's going to have to employ it, you would imagine, against probably just his takedown defense against Khabib, and I don't think Khabib could take the punishment that Tony would have taken that fight, and he's definitely not as good movement and angles as Tony.
Yeah, I don't think Khabib stays conscious if he gets hit like that.
Yeah, not many
I
do.
love Khabib. Khabib's my favorite fighter, but I don't think he stays conscious if he gets hit like that.
Yeah, a real interesting fight. Real interesting fight.
Yeah, that's the fight. That's the fight right there.
Yeah, that'll be good. Hopefully, Khabib's dad pulls through, and
yeah, hopefully. It seems like he's doing better from what I understand, but yeah, we'll see what happens with that. Hopefully.
Yeah, so thoughts out to him for that, and hopefully we'll see that fight before the end of the year.
Yeah,
that'll be amazing.
Yeah, that's a legacy fight.
Really is. Yeah, Gaethje's done phenomenal since he had a little blip, and he's gone back to the drawing board and really fixed things up. And he's calmed down. I mean, I think that's what Trevor Whitman's such a calm character. I think he's just shined that across onto his student. And Gaethje as a mellow sort of, he didn't chase Tony down at any point, and as a mellow sort of relaxed striker, he looks so good.
Yeah, agreed.
He's still so exciting. You know, this shows you how full on and full throttle he was before. That they've changed the pace in which he sets and fights and the intensity, and he's still one of the most exciting guys to watch.
Yeah. He's unbelievable, man. He's a fucking nice guy too.
Yeah,
he's a nice.
Yeah, definitely. All right. Lastly, just anyone, if you want to shout anyone out, any sponsors, anyone you want to give a bit of airtime to before we wrap it up.
No sponsors really, if any, you know, if you guys want to keep up with me, I put a lot of content on Instagram. So Eric the Gentleman on Instagram, and then Eric Uresk Submission Grappling on YouTube. I put up quite a bit of content on there, and more to come, and hopefully be getting my own podcast off the ground soon. And that's about it, man. If people want to get in touch with me for seminars or training or any of those things, that you can just DM my Instagram. I'm pretty active, and I'll get back to you. So
sweet. Well, thanks a lot for your time. Enjoy the rest of your evening. I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Right on, man.
Take care of yourself and stay safe.
All right, brothers. I'll talk to you guys soon.
Cheers, Eric. Take care, mate.
Bye.